excited about this shit. But unlike Paul, I do believe in business plans. And I'm going to mention my business name because I don't have quite the credibility that he has yet. So we'll start off with that. My name is Kyle Golding. I'm the CEO for the Golding Group. We do business process development, strategy, and communication integration. I'm also one half of a weekly podcast called the Neo Marketing Podcast on iTunes and YouTube. So we're going to do three basic things today. We're going to talk about the universal truths of branding, pushing back on misconceptions and giving you some ideas of what it really means to talk about branding, the elements and execution of branding, and then what the hell you do with it once you get it, okay? So we're going to start right at the top with the universal truths of branding. Branding is managing the process of dichotomy. What does that mean? Managing two opposite things at any given time is the actual work process that you create branding from. I'll give you a great example of that. Your brand must simultaneously be extremely attractive to your most potential audience and completely differentiate you from your competition at the exact same time. So, attractive, different, same time. Your brand needs to be specific but universal. When we get through working through the process, we're going to talk about targeting very specific audiences. But it has to be something that can be identified, even if it's seen briefly and partially, in a universal context, so that someone can know immediately who you are and what it is you do, because the point of branding is for people to understand who you are and what you do.
What you said first one, dichotomy of what?
The management of dichotomy. Your brand is going to do two opposite things at every given time. It's going to be specific, it's going to be universal. It's going to differentiate you, and it's going to be identifiable and attractive to your most potential audience. Your brand must be immediate and have longevity. It has to work in the first second someone engages it, and has to work 25 years from now. Your branding must be on trend, but not trendy. If you're designing branding today for a company you're going to launch next month, based on what's happening in the market for the last 6 months, you're already 18 months behind. But trendy are items that are capturing attention in super small segments and don't have lasting power. If you're launching today and your logo looks like a fidget spinner, you fell for a trend as opposed to being on trend. So branding has to be current and have longevity. It has to be on trend because it has to have continuity in the market you enter, but it can't have so much specific continuity to a specific 3-6 month period of time, which is where trends are, that it becomes dated the moment you launch it. You must control conflicting ideas with your branding. What this means is your startup has to be a new and exciting answer to a problem. But it also needs to represent the best, most well-established answer to that problem. Dichotomy. If it's a startup, it needs to bring something new to the industry, possibly even be disruptive. But if you want people to do business with you, you need to appear to be reliable. Again, dichotomy. And, of course, if you're in a startup, you're a rookie. But if you want people to spend money with you or do business with you or create a business relationship with you, you have to establish yourself. So you have to do both at the same time with your branding. Okay? That's the first universal truth of branding, is it's the management of dichotomy. Universal truth number 2. Can't polish a turd. The best branding, the slickest marketing, the best salespeople cannot save a shit product or idea. You will learn in the branding and marketing process if you have a shit product or idea. If you can work through this process and develop solid branding that's based in some things we're going to talk about here in this process, then you have a product, service, company that can move forward. But in this process, if you keep hitting brick walls, if you keep finding places that you're failing or that you're not actually doing anything interesting that someone will pay for in a different way, that's not a us-to offering, you should abandon that idea because you're wasting time and money. So branding doesn't save bad ideas, it exposes bad ideas. And by branding, I mean the branding process, the work that we do behind the scenes in order to figure out how we're going to market and sell that product. Make sure I don't skip any of these. So everyone thinks about doing a startup and creating branding. That's cool. It's going to be cool doing a startup, be the next Facebook, right? I'm doing the thing, it's my thing, makes it really cool. They get focused on cool, flashy, and exciting, and not building something that's specific to their audience and consistent for the next 3, 5, 8, 10, 15 years. What's cool is a scalable, profitable company. So don't get caught up in flash and style when you're beginning the branding process. It'll lead you down the wrong path. Great branding based on your ego, your attitudes, and your tastes. That you is the founder, the original members of the organization, the graphic designer that's working on the logo, the founder's spouse, the funder. All of these people are the you. Take you out of the equation. Solid branding that's going to work for you for the next 5 to 25 years is not based on, man, I really like that. It's based on, does it do its job to the specific audience that you're looking for in the way that you need it to execute today, tomorrow, and 5 years from now. Can't tell you how many times I've had brilliant branding product that I presented to the client, and the next day he says, my wife hates it. That's fine if your wife is the target audience. If your wife is the exact opposite of the target audience, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter if you like red more than blue. It doesn't matter if I need to incorporate some orange because I'm from OSU, if it doesn't make sense to your brand. And you definitely can't force the idea of, but my way will work, people will come around to my way of thinking via branding. That's a recipe for disaster as well. Finally, the final truth, universal truth about branding is, it's not about being better, it's about being different. Everyone starts their startup, everyone has an idea for the next big thing because we'll just do it better. That's crap. You have to create something that is different. You have to deliver the product or service in a different way. It has to have a different offering or a different connection to the target audience, or it has to come through them in a different way, different delivery, etc. Different is the focus of your branding. Not better, not sexy, not cool, not the best, different. The 2 words today that I'm going to say a lot, the 2 things that you need to walk away from this from knowing these things are differentiation, number 1, and then the next thing we'll talk about positioning. If you understand positioning and you understand differentiation, you can work through a branding process. If you're not interested in differentiation and you find the positioning work to be too much or it doesn't get you the answers you're looking for, then your branding will fail and your business is more likely to fail. So don't be better, be different. Too many people look at branding and they want a universal mark that means everything to everyone. It doesn't exist. Because it's another thing, if you've ever heard me speak, you've heard this before and you'll hear it a couple times today. everyone is not your client. Everyone is not buying your product or service. Everyone is not an objective. If your business is going to be successful because everyone will like it and buy it, you've already failed. You must position yourself to differentiate your product or service so that you only market to those most likely to purchase. Everyone else, it just doesn't matter. Not that we need them to be angry at us, we just don't care. If they know about us, what their opinion of us is, and we absolutely positively never want to spend marketing funds or effort on the people that are outside of our target audience. It's a waste of time and money. The last universal truth. A logo is not branding.
Amen.
And if you hire a graphic designer, and I started my life in marketing as a graphic designer, so don't take this personal, graphic designers. If you hire a graphic designer to create your branding, you've already screwed up. Unless you've actually created the branding and created a brief that you're hiring a graphic designer to execute on. Because your logo is not branding. Your business name is not branding. Your color scheme is not branding. These are elements of branding, but they aren't in and of themselves branding. And so when a graphic designer tells you they will brand your company for $500 or $5,000 or $50,000, and they are going to design something that they show you on a screen, your cart is before your horse. You have to do the work before that, actual branding and marketing work, before you can get into creative execution. And that'll be the next thing we talk about. It's not enough to have a great logo. It's definitely not enough to have a color scheme and a cut line without a logo, or a properly developed name. Going back to that ego point, sure, you can name the company after yourself. I did. But you better have a damn good reason. And it needs to make sense in the development process as to why using the name of the founder or someone essential in makes perfect sense. So, Barry Switzer's locker room storage units, yeah, right, he's famous. That makes sense, right? Rick's locker room storage, well, who would be attracted to that? No one knows who the heck Rick is or why we care, right? So if there's an element within a name, you could use it. If it's just simply because, man, come on, people think I'm cool. You're not finished with the branding process, and you're definitely not ready to launch this branding and launch the company until you have written all this down and created a style guide. The style guide not only tells you what you will do with your branding, use of your keywords, your slogans, your variations of your elevator speech. We forgot to say elevator speech is a branding element. All you will write down and define how you will use all these things and then how you won't use all these things. Variations of your logo that are unacceptable or that dilute your brand. Some companies never ever show their logo without the full name of the company or without the full name and the cut line. But sometimes when you buy an ad or you sponsor something and you give someone your logo to use, they'll cut off your cut line for space. Or they'll move your logo, your mark, from the top to the side for space. And if you don't have protocols in place to let them know that is utterly unacceptable, it'll happen to you, and these small dilutions of your brand eventually, at the end of the day, actually slow down the process of people understanding who you are, the connection to you, make sure that you're who you are, not your competition. So a style guide of what you will do and will not do and accept in your brand, written down and given to anyone in the company who's going to have access to the branding elements, is an essential before you can launch your company and move forward. An internal brief. An internal brief, by the name alone, right? It's something that only internal people see, external people don't ever see. It's a variation of your style guide, but again, much like talking about keywords or phrases that you want to use, internally communicating to your employees for their external communication what your brand represents, your elevator speech and all the variations, and any other type of concept that you want people who talk about your company or explain it in any official role to have in the back of their head as an explanation process, and not necessarily something that they have to say word for word like an elevator speech. If you can't work that far through a brand, from your mark, your name, your typography, your combinations, your color schemes, to a style guide, to an internal process document, if you can't start from A and end up at that internal document, then either, again, you don't have the right people in place, or the product or service that you're trying to represent is so weak, you need to go back to the development side. So, good on that. So, marketing and branding are two things that go hand in hand. Branding is an element of the marketing process. Marketing happens before advertising. Marketing and advertising are very different, okay? Marketing and branding is the work before you do the work that becomes advertising. Advertising is the outward execution of your marketing. The marketing is the complete thought process behind your branding. And they inform each other back and forth. Branding drives marketing. Marketing is executed via advertising. Marketing is a two-way conversation. Marketing puts information out into the world, and it receives information back, be it feedback, sales numbers, approval numbers, clicks on your website. Every action that happens in the world via your advertising can inform the decision-making of your marketing. And marketing is tied to your brand and to your branding process. Advertising is standing on the street corner and yelling at people. Advertising is a one-way conversation, putting information out into the world. The reactions and actions created by your advertising is a two-way conversation of marketing, and your marketing is always tied to your branding. Which is why it's so essential that we start with branding, that we get it 100% right from the beginning, because we're sticking with this brand for a very long time. Now, the rule used to be 5 years. Markets move really fast these days. A lot of people are doing 3-year marketing plans now instead of 5, because things move so fast. You're still not moving off that initial launch branding for the first 3 years unless you have a massive pivot or the industry you're in implodes on itself. So that's why doing this work that we're about to discuss, the actual building of a brand, the work that's behind your branding, that's behind your marketing, that informs your advertising, is so essential because you are stuck with it for a good amount of time. Or all of that marketing, advertising, execution, all the money that you put forward, all the effort is set on fire if you make a change in your brand without a massive event dictating that. And even then, that if you pivot the company, you change the branding to reflect the pivot, not simply to just be different. Good? So, you must start branding very early in the process of developing your startup. But you can't start with branding first. If you have a great, catchy name for a product that you're now going to wrap a business around, you're too early. Because a catchy name doesn't sell it. Remember I said you can't say a shit product, right? Catchy name doesn't equate to a product. You have to start with a product or service idea that's viable, minimally viable, and before you spend too much time and effort into developing that product or service, you begin concurrently the branding process. Because the branding process is going to let you make decisions about how that product is developed and whether it should be developed at all or might potentially want to be scrapped. Because like I said earlier, if you can't answer the basic questions of branding and marketing, then you shouldn't be developing the product or service. If you can't find a differentiation point and a position in the industry, then no one wants it. What's the point of trying to go and force it down people's throat or simply do it better? Typically, people call this the SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, along with a features and benefits list of your product or service, what it is you're actually offering to people in a tactical manner. Here's where everyone screws up. Everyone screws up because they only want to talk about strengths and they don't want to talk about weaknesses, and they add strengths or they attribute strengths that they don't actually have. It's the best, it's the biggest, it's the fanciest, it's the sexiest, it's the fastest. It's the best price. It can't be all those things. Every business has a strength, multiple strengths and multiple weaknesses. The identification of strengths and weaknesses is the beginning and the basis of all branding. This is an internal process that creates internal documents. If you lie to yourself on your SWOT analysis and you have 100 strengths and 2 weaknesses, you're setting yourself up to fail. You're setting your own money on fire. Because it's an internal document and no one else is going to see it, you have to be honest about what the strengths and weaknesses are. Things that are very economical, right? McDonald's hamburgers. Are they high quality? Why? It costs too much to make that happen, right? Things that are delivered to you very fast. Are they high quality? Typically not, right? But things that are high quality, are they delivered to you fast or economically? No. You have to pick one or the other as to what your product strengths and weaknesses are. Every strength should create a counter weakness. This is not a reason to stop. This is just a reason to understand this as we move through the process. The second half of this equation, now that you have strengths and weaknesses and what your company actually does and offers on this side of the page, on this side of the page is your competition, the competitive analysis. Everything else that's already in the market and in the industry that you're going to compete against. And that is broken up between primary and secondary. So primary is very easy. McDonald's hamburgers competes with Wendy's and Sonic and Arby's. Coca-Cola competes with Pepsi. Budweiser competes with Coors. That's super simple. But Budweiser also competes with Iron Monk and craft breweries and wine and hard lemonade and real lemonade and Coca-Cola and water and bottled water and sports drinks. Because anything you might drink might take the place of a bottle of Budweiser. If you own a restaurant, it's real easy to say, my Italian restaurant competes against specifically Italian restaurants and then other restaurants. Sure. And then food trucks, and then grocery stores, and then TV dinners. And then it also competes with movies, sports, and a Netflix account because you're competing for the same dollar and attention for, I'm going to spend $100 on dinner with my wife. I'm going to spend $50 on dinner with my wife and the other $50 in a cocktail and a movie. So there's direct and indirect competition. Your focus in branding is your direct competition. So once you understand yourself, what you provide and what you offer, who your direct competition is and what their strengths and weaknesses are, you can find your position, which is the place within your industry that you can best, most likely win, compete. That is your strengths versus your competitors' weaknesses. We're changing liquor laws in Oklahoma. Liquor stores can now, soon, put cold High Point beer in their liquor store. But that means Walmart can too. You wouldn't believe how many liquor store owners I've talked to in the last 12 months are like, how am I going to compete against Walmart? You're going to kill Walmart. What are you talking about? Is customer service great at Walmart? What beer is Walmart going to put in on their shelves? Just the stuff that sells. They're going to give more versions of Budweiser and Coors, and right? They're not going to put Iron Monk in their store probably. It doesn't make enough money for Walmart. It doesn't make enough sense. The liquor store can still do that. The liquor store can focus on the things that Walmart would never do: customer service, salesperson expertise, hours of operation. They can do special events. They can negotiate deals with the distributors for special packaging that's only in their store. Walmart would never reach out for that. Walmart competes on beating down the distributor's price. Liquor stores can be best friends with the distributor, trying to make that distributor more money. See how this works? The strengths of a small liquor store versus the weakness of what Walmart is when it looks like a David and Goliath comparison. That's how you position yourself against your competition. It doesn't mean you're ever going to find a place that no one else sits. But if you're competing with 100 entities in a market. And 96 of them have various strengths, and only 4 of them have the same strength you do. Now you have a path of least resistance for your position, as opposed to the majority of our competitors have the same strength. Let's have that strength too. So positioning yourself allows you to compete at the highest level with your most specific audience. Because again, everyone is not your client. The people who make beer do not care about anyone under 21. And most likely people who are much into their senior citizen years, they've stopped drinking alcohol, right? So 18-year-olds do not need to get excited about craft beer. And craft brewers certainly, and the local liquor stores certainly don't need to motivate the 18-year-olds, or 14-year-olds, or 9-year-olds, or millennials in general, right? So this is where people make a mistake, is they want their brand, the idea, the company name and the logo and who you are, to be universal and loved by everyone and thought of by everyone. And that's fine if you're a massive big box retailer or someone like Nike who does attempt to go after as many segments as possible. But if you have a phone app, if you have a piece of technology, if you're B2B, the worst thing you could do is spend your time, money, and effort trying to be universal to everyone. So positioning with a very specific audience in mind, your strengths versus your competitors' weaknesses, is how you create your branding proposition. That and the differentiation idea are the 2 biggest things you need to know when trying to create branding for a business. So I have this saying I like to say, because I'm a marketing guy, is that marketing department should run every company.
Here, here.
So, engineers and programmers like to build cool stuff. Sales guys and girls to say, I can sell anything to anyone. And the accountants and the HR people, they just want their numbers to add up. And people on a production floor just want to know how much effort it takes to get a product in the back door, to do what they need to do, and get the product out the door. The marketing department, the marketing process, is how we have to decide who is most likely to buy our product or service, what motivates them to choose us over someone else, and how do I tailor my imagery, messaging, channels, repetition, etc., in order to best engage that person in the way they want to be engaged, and then do that in a variety of ways that are all measurable in order to create a marketing advertising program that can be beneficial to the client, to the company, and create a return on investment. If you launch without these ideas, you have no real target that you're actually drawing to and building upon. And at that point, you're just wishing on luck. And luck is not a business strategy, right? Okay, so we're getting close to the end here. Do we have any questions so far? Because I'm throwing a ton of stuff at you guys. I'm going to try to jam as much in at the last second here, okay? So, the stages of marketing. Like I said, branding is an element of marketing. So, marketing starts in research and planning. And that's where the beginning of the branding process starts. It's like competitive analysis research. It's your internal inflection, your SWOT analysis. From there, the branding process goes to development and into execution. All the things you learned from your positioning and your differentiation, now you can figure out how you're going to execute it. This is where you get into tactics and channels and repetition, etc. Marketing then goes into integration and distribution. It's where advertising is actually taking the marketing message to the audience that you've identified, the way you've identified it, and then your audience is reacting to it. Advertising in and of itself, the ideas of advertising, placing an ad in a newspaper, placing a Facebook ad, hosting a podcast, being a sponsor on an event like this, these are advertising elements that by themselves do not actually inform your marketing of anything. So your marketing plan has measurement. This is the next level of marketing, is measurement and another element of measurement. Measurement and adjustment. You go back to the beginning and you start all over again. Marketing, tactics, execution, advertising makes changes every time you do it. You adapt your advertising for the audience, for the channel, for the specific thing you're trying to accomplish. You can run major campaigns, sub-campaigns, and even niche campaigns. Back to school sales are niche campaigns within a major campaign. Doesn't change the major campaign. It definitely doesn't change the brand proposition of what something is, but it's a very immediate, small thing that's an advertising execution based on marketing tactics. The brand never changes. The core message never changes. The position never changes. The actual audience that you're attracting, even if you're trying to attract a sub-audience, this core audience never changes. And so too many times entrepreneurs and startups get so focused on, well, but what if something happens and we find out other people like it that we didn't understand or know? The branding doesn't change, your marketing tactics change. Your advertising change. Because marketing plans, advertising campaigns are designed to change, be measured, adjusted, and done again over and over again. So don't think that if a marketing tactic doesn't work or an advertising campaign fails or succeeds in a different way than you thought, that you need to change your branding. Your branding core still stays the same. Because at the end of the day, the way brands work is consistency. Consistency is the absolute only real tool of branding. Defining who you are, what it looks like, how you execute it via your creative elements, and then using them consistently over and over and over and over and over again, never wavering. But your marketing and advertising can make changes based on audience, channel, time of year, offer, etc. But you have to stay bedrock in your market, in your branding. Branding must stay consistent. Any dilution of your branding just eliminates all the effort and work that you put into it up to that point. This is where people make mistakes in that they panic because something isn't working immediately, or the reactions to your advertising is different than you expected, and they think that means change everything. It's not what it means. It means stick to your core, stay with your primary audience, but adjust the way you talk to them and how you reach out to them, and that is marketing and advertising.
So, question for you. You had that continuum, branding all the way through tactics.
Right.
Right. At what point up in that continuum can you do A/B split testing without modifying the brand at all? Is it really just in the core message at the end of an advertisement campaign, or can you do some A/B split testing within almost the strategy of a brand?
You can, so the idea of A/B testing in your advertising should never ever affect your brand. Outside of massive amounts of feedback of negativity towards your brand in general. So if the reason advertising A campaign works well and the reason advertising campaign B fails immediately is people say, because I hate your brand. That's a whole different problem. But you can't base it on a singular, because if A works with your brand, but B doesn't work with your brand, it's execution, it's advertising and marketing tactics. It's still never your brand. Now brands can become wounded. Enron is a great example. Remember Enron? Yeah, right? They changed their name. They changed their name because Enron became an albatross, right? Now they were also in a company that was around a long time. They had a lot of things that they could do because they had a bunch of money. But your brand can become so polluted, you must change it, but that's another one of those major factors that would make you change a brand. Either a pivot in what you do. So a lot of startups pivot, right? There's nothing wrong with pivoting a startup. You get into the market, and the market pushes back, and you realize what we thought was our position, our differentiation model was here, it's really over here. Small moves doesn't change your brand, it changes your marketing and advertising. But a major pivot, where we're a phone app company developer, and then now we're a B2B direct programmer, is a completely different audience and market, and so that's something you could change your branding on. But even then, I wouldn't make a massive change. I think it would just change some elements of your branding. You keep the core of what you're doing because you've established that. At least you've established it as being a company with some sort of reputation, that you exist and you're doing business, and that no one's walking around town saying that you ripped them off or did something really awful. So a company has to have really polluted branding before you let information you learn in your marketing and advertising change the brand.
So then why are companies like Starbucks taking the risk of making significant changes to their logo, which for some reason always causes a lot of media hype?
Because what you just said in the second half, because it causes media hype. Because Starbucks is so established, they can do that. Starbucks can drop the logo off and just use Starbucks, you know who they are. Because they're a monster brand. Apple has changed the Apple logo several times along the years. They've actually changed it about 15 times. You just never noticed because they're really small moves. Everyone noticed the rainbow apple going to the monochrome apple. That monochrome apple has changed every 2 or 3 years. The one that's right here today is different than the day they went from the rainbow to this. But they made small moves, but they're a monster brand who has brand equity. They can do that. We're talking about startups. The first 3 to 5 years of your business life, you need people to understand who you are, what it is you do, why I care, so I can buy or create a business relationship with you, and then repeat if I had a good experience or if it's a positive thing that I want to return to, and then establish yourself as a real business that's not going to go bankrupt tomorrow, that's not just taking the money and running, and it's not hiding behind something else. You have to establish these credibility as a startup. That's why consistency is the key in startup. Major players, Budweiser, Nike, Starbucks, they can play with these things. And sometimes I feel like Starbucks does things just to get the media play. So again, I can't strive this enough to you guys. Consistency, 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 consistency. Create your brand, working through the process. Bring in third-party people who are completely partial. You can get them to sign an NDA. We won't discuss your weaknesses. To look at what you've come up with and tell you what you're missing and what you haven't. But creating a position of strength, your strength versus your competition, putting your best foot forward in a differentiation mode, setting yourself apart, not just better, true and honest with yourself internally, creating that external execution via your marketing, which informs your advertising. Your advertising changes, but the brand itself, who you are, your cut line, your colors, your logo, if it's the logo's in the bottom corner or the top corner, all these things need to be consistent, 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 consistent. Differentiation, positioning, consistency. Last note, too many people get super excited about a logo or a color scheme or something like this on a screen. The graphic designer shows you the mock-up of the logo, and it's the sexiest thing you've ever seen. And you love it, and you want it. Well, guess what? It's not always going to be on your screen, even if you're a fully electronic item like a phone app. I designed a logo for a phone app once, and I also had to make sure that we had printed materials, that that logo could be represented in black and white, in grayscale, in 2-color, that you can stitch it on a shirt, you can screen print it on a shirt, that you could print it on a banner, that you could put it on your letterheads, your business cards, etc. If the logo is built wrong, you're going to screw yourself when you actually try to go execute these things. So don't get so tied up. We talked about ego and making things sexy and all that. Don't get so tied up in it's a beautiful mark. A, it's got to be connected to your right audience in the right way and represent your company in the right way. But B, it has to be reproducible and used in a variety of ways. You guys got to understand the difference between R&B and CMYK, RGB and CMYK, between 1-color, 2-color process, all these printing things. And when you're ready to say, this is our logo, and this is our cut line, and this is our branding, make sure you've talked to a graphic designer and a printer and ask them if there are roadblocks that you're creating for yourself because you created a logo that's 48 colors. So it needs to be PMS colors, 1, 2, 3 at the most. It needs to be CMYK and RGB, and certain colors in the spectrum go from RGB to CMYK, and oranges become browns, and greens become purples. It's really weird. So make sure that these things translate and relate back to each other. Don't get so caught up in damn, it looks good on my screen, and make sure that you can execute it in the real world. Or else you're back to the drawing board and you're right back to the whole process. But again, make sure that it's attractive, interesting, and something that will connect with your audience, your most specific primary target audience. Not you, not your mom, not your best friend, your neighbor, the person most likely to see it, be interested in it, understand it, engage it, and then create a business relationship with your company. That's the only role of branding. That's what we do with branding. That's how it works, and most specifically for startups.
Awesome. Kyle, thank you very much. Are you gonna hang out a little bit?
I'm here as long as anyone has any questions.
Cool.
I'll sit and chat with them.
Fantastic. So,
Recap, how'd it go?
The first half was good.
I think that's some of the best information I've heard you drop out of.
Like, get you just enough to understand that you don't know everything, but you know enough to bring in a consultant like me, because you're not going to get ripped off because you know enough.
Yeah.
You're not going to pay for all this extra or do things that are unnecessary.
Yeah.
That's all I said. When you hire a graphic designer, the first thing you'll do is make your logo 5 minutes into the conversation.
Yeah.
You should fire that at graphic designer, because that's not the process.
Yeah.
You got to know the process.
Yeah, that makes sense.